Professor Tyke, a brilliant mathematician from the peaceful Lumina species, straightened his iridescent robes as he prepared for the first day of the Galactic Exchange program. His thin, elongated fingers trembled slightly as he reviewed the student roster. 5 humans, Deathworlders, would be joining his advanced mathematical theory class at the prestigious Galactic Academy. The floating campus of the Academy was built on an asteroid that orbited a gentle yellow star. Most species who attended came from worlds with stable climates and few natural dangers. The news that students from Earth, classified as a death world due to its harsh conditions, would be joining had caused quite a stir among faculty. "Are you certain this is wise?" asked Professor Nari, his colleague whose translucent skin pulsed with concern. "Their planet has active volcanoes, devastating storms, and predatory creatures. The humans themselves have a history of territorial conflicts. The Council believes in educational diversity," Tyke replied, though he shared her concerns. "Besides, how dangerous can they be in a mathematics classroom?" Professor Nari's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "They evolved on a planet where they could die at any moment. Such beings develop unusual ways of thinking." Tyke entered his classroom, noting how the round tables arranged in perfect geometric harmony now seemed vulnerable. The luminous students arrived first, their light-emitting, skin-casting gentle glows as they settled into their seats. Next came the Fralxy students, plant-like beings who communicated through subtle color changes in their leaf-like appendages. Then the humans entered. The 5 Deathworlders, Dae, Jun, Hana, Mina, and Hyun, looked surprisingly normal, given their fearsome reputation. They had no visible weapons. Their skin didn't glow or change color. They were simply bipedal with rounded limbs and flat faces. The only striking feature was their eyes, alert, scanning, constantly assessing. "Welcome," Professor Tyke said, his translator converting his musical tones into standard galactic speech. "Please find seats." The humans bowed slightly, a gesture of respect, Tyke recalled from his cultural briefing, and dispersed to different tables, integrating with the alien students rather than clustering together as he had expected. The first class was a review of fundamental principles. Professor Tyke observed the humans carefully. They took notes. They asked thoughtful questions. They collaborated respectfully with their alien classmates. Perhaps the reports of their dangerous nature had been exaggerated. After class, the human, named Dae, approached him. "Professor, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to study here. We understand there were concerns about accepting Earth students." Tyke's skin rippled with surprise at this directness. "Educational exchange benefits all species," he replied diplomatically. "Still, we appreciate it. Earth's mathematical traditions are young compared to the Lumina's 1,000 years of geometric theory." "You've studied our mathematical history?" Tyke asked, impressed. "Of course. Know your environment, know your resources," Dae said with a smile that showed too many teeth. "Basic survival principles." Tyke noted how even casual conversation with humans somehow circled back to survival. Fascinating. Later that evening, he met with Professor Nari in the faculty lounge. "How did it go?" she asked. "Any incidents?" "None. They were perfectly well behaved." "That's almost disappointing," Nari admitted. The biology department was hoping for some dramatic demonstration of their Death World adaptations. Professor Tyke shook his head. "Mathematics transcends biology. Regardless of their evolutionary background, they recognize the universal elegance of numbers." As weeks passed, the human students continued to impress. They worked efficiently, asked insightful questions, and showed remarkable adaptability when faced with new concepts. Professor Tyke began to relax, even growing fond of his Death World students with their strange idioms and curious perspectives. "Perhaps," he told Professor Nari one day, "we've all been too quick to judge. These humans are students first, Deathworlders second." "I hope you're right," Nari replied. "But don't forget, they come from a world that taught them to always expect the worst." In a mathematics class 1 month into the semester, Professor Tayek decided to challenge his students with a complex mathematical problem. The classroom hummed with quiet focus as he projected the problem onto the interactive display board. Today we will explore resource distribution across 12 interconnected nodes, he explained, his translator converting his musical tones into standard galactic speech. You must determine how to optimize limited supplies with varying access and need variables. The problem was elegant in its complexity. A mathematical exercise that combined spatial geometry with probability theory. Such problems had practical applications in colony planning and trade route optimization. Professor Tyke had used it for years to help students understand abstract mathematical concepts. The Lumina students approached it with their typical methodical style. Their light-emitting skin pulsed with soft blues and greens as they worked individually, developing elegant equations that prioritized harmony and efficiency. The plant-like Fralxi students formed small discussion groups. Their leaf-like appendages waved gently as they applied their species' traditional pattern recognition techniques to the challenge. But the humans did something unexpected. June, grab those styluses, Day said, clearing space on their table. Mina, can you sketch a basic map? Professor Tyke watched with curiosity as the 5 humans pushed aside their computational tablets and gathered around a single table. Hyun collected various small items from all their bags: styluses, erasers, small metal clips, and note cards. Hana, calculate how quickly resources will run out at each point, June suggested. The humans arranged the items across their table, in a pattern that roughly matched the node distribution from the problem. They used styluses to represent terrain features, erasers became resource stockpiles, and notebook pages formed boundaries. Professor Tyke drifted closer, pretending to check on other students while listening to the humans. If we establish our main distribution center here, Mina was saying, pointing to a junction between several nodes, we can protect our supply lines while maintaining operational flexibility. But that leaves us vulnerable to disruption, Hyun countered, rearranging several items. We need backup positions here and here. Good point. Day nodded. In case of emergency, we can fall back to these secondary positions. Professor Tyke's skin rippled with confusion. The mathematical problem said nothing about emergencies or protection. It was simply about efficient distribution. What about these isolated nodes? Hana asked, pointing to 2 points at the edges of their physical model. They have high need but low access. Classic supply line problem, June replied. We need to establish forward distribution points and secure the routes between them. Secure? Professor Tyke couldn't help interrupting. The problem doesn't involve any security variables. The humans looked up, momentarily startled. Their intense focus had been so complete they hadn't noticed the professor hovering nearby. Oh, just our terminology, Day explained smoothly. We mean mathematically optimal. I see, Professor Tyke said, though he didn't entirely. Please continue. As he moved away, he heard Mina whisper, we should calculate casualty rates if not relevant to the problem. Day cut her off quickly, glancing at the professor's retreating form. For the remainder of the class, Professor Tyke observed the humans with growing unease. Their approach was unlike anything he had seen in his centuries of teaching. Where other species sought mathematical elegance or pattern harmony, the humans spoke of defensive depth, tactical flexibility, and contingency planning. When the class ended, the humans presented their solution. Mathematically, it was sound, even innovative in certain aspects, but their explanation revealed thinking patterns that disturbed the professor. Our solution prioritizes maintaining distribution integrity under variable conditions, Day explained. We've calculated optimal positioning to respond to any disruptive scenarios. Interesting approach, Professor Tyke said carefully, though the problem didn't specify any disruptions. True, Hyun nodded, but any good solution must account for worst-case scenarios. After the students left, Professor Tyke remained in the empty classroom, reviewing the human solution. Their mathematics was correct, but their underlying assumptions troubled him. They had approached a simple academic exercise as if preparing for conflict. That evening, He accessed the Academy's databases, searching for information about Earth. What he discovered left him deeply unsettled. The Deathworlders' history was filled with resource conflicts, territorial disputes, and constant adaptation to threats. Professor Tyke realized with growing concern that the humans hadn't just solved his mathematical problem, they had turned it into a battle plan. That evening, Professor Tyke could not stop thinking about what he had witnessed in his classroom. The humans' approach to a simple mathematical problem had revealed something profound about their species. He needed to understand more. In his private quarters, Professor Tyke accessed the Academy's vast database of xenological studies. He entered, search parameters for Earth and its inhabitants, focusing on problem-solving methodologies and cognitive patterns. The screen filled with information that made his luminescent skin dim with concern. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, a planet with extreme environmental variations, frequent natural disasters, and abundant predatory life forms. Humans had evolved not just to survive such conditions but to anticipate threats constantly. Fascinating, Professor Tyke murmured as he read about humanity's history. Their mathematics had often developed in direct response to warfare. Geometry, for building fortifications. Trigonometry for calculating projectile trajectories. Logistics for moving armies. Even their modern computational theories had roots in code breaking during global conflicts. The next morning, Professor Tyke called an emergency meeting of the Academy's governing council. The 7 members from different species gathered in the circular chamber, their expressions showing varying degrees of concern. "I believe we may have underestimated the implications of admitting Deathworlders to our Academy," Professor Tyke began. He displayed recordings from his class highlighting the humans' unusual approach. They weren't just solving the problem, he explained. They were treating it as a military exercise, planning defensive positions, calculating attack strategies, establishing supply routes as if preparing for conflict. Counselor Rim's bioluminescent crest flashed with alarm. "Should we expel them? If their thought patterns are inherently violent, before we decide," Professor Nari interrupted, "we should speak with them directly. Perhaps there is a cultural misunderstanding." The 5 human students were summoned to the council chamber. They entered with visible confusion, taking seats in the center of the circle of alien educators. "We understand your species approaches problems differently," Counselor Rim stated. "Your solution to Professor Tyke's mathematical exercise has raised concerns about violent tendencies." The humans exchanged puzzled glances. "Violent?" Day asked, genuinely confused. "We were just solving the resource distribution problem efficiently." "You spoke of defensive positions and tactical advantages," Professor Tyke pointed out, "terms associated with conflict." "That's just terminology," Hana explained. "On Earth, we learn to approach challenges from multiple angles. Planning for worst-case scenarios is second nature to us. Your planet has shaped your thinking," Professor Nari observed. "You anticipate threats where we see only theoretical problems." "It's not about violence," Mina added earnestly. "It's about survival and efficiency. On Earth, failing to plan for disruptions can be fatal." June leaned forward. "When you live on a planet where the weather can kill you, where resources can suddenly become scarce, you develop certain habits of thought. We use similar approaches for everything from urban planning to disaster management," Hyun said. "It's not about wanting conflict. It's about being prepared for reality." The council members communicated silently among themselves, their skin patterns shifting in complex conversations invisible to human eyes. Finally, Counselor Rim spoke. "We have decided against expulsion. However, you will remain under observation. This cultural difference is significant." After the humans left, Professor Tyke remained troubled. The gulf between their worldviews seemed vast. What his species saw as concerning militaristic thinking, humans viewed as practical problem-solving. "Perhaps we can learn from each other," Professor Nari suggested, noting Tyke's distress. "Their perspective, while unsettling, comes from adaptation to genuine challenges." "I hope you're right," Professor Tyke replied. "But I wonder what would happen if these Deathworlders ever faced a real crisis. not just a theoretical one. Would their combat-ready thinking be a danger or a blessing? He would soon have his answer, far sooner than he expected. 2 weeks later, disaster struck the Galactic Academy. A micrometeorite penetrated the asteroid's protective shields and damaged the environmental control systems. Life support began, failing across multiple sections of the campus, and the automated repair systems couldn't handle the emergency. Professor Tyke was reviewing test results in his classroom when the lights flickered and dimmed. The air suddenly felt thin and cold. The environmental display on the wall flashed red warning symbols. "Attention all faculty and students," announced the Academy's central computer. "Environmental systems compromised. Oxygen levels decreasing in sectors 3, 7, and 12. Please proceed calmly to emergency shelters." Students poured into the corridors, their voices rising in panic. Professor Tyke tried to maintain order, but fear spread quickly. The Lumina students froze in place, their skin pulsing with alarmed patterns of red and yellow. They had evolved on a world with minimal environmental threats and had no instinctual response to sudden danger. The Frauxi students huddled together, their leaf-like appendages curling inward with stress. Their species dealt with threats through collective defensive postures, not active problem-solving. Then Professor Tyke noticed the 5 human students. Instead of panicking, they had formed a tight circle and were speaking rapidly to each other. Their faces showed concern, but not fear. "Professor," Day called out, breaking from the group. "What's the status of the environmental systems?" "The main controls are damaged," Professor Tyke replied, surprised by the humans' calm demeanor. "Automated repairs are failing." Day nodded as if this information confirmed something. "We need to access the environmental control interface. Can you authorize that?" Before Professor Tyke could respond, the oxygen alert chimed again. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Mina Hyun, map the ventilation system," Day ordered, his voice steady and authoritative. "June, calculate oxygen distribution priorities based on lifeform needs. Hana, work with me on redundant power pathways." The humans sprang into action, with startling efficiency. They commandeered the classroom's interactive displays, linking them to the Academy's environmental systems. Within minutes, they had created a real-time model of the failing life support network. "Sir," Day addressed, "Professor Tyke, we need your mathematical expertise to help us reconfigure the environmental algorithms." Professor Tyke found himself working alongside the humans, applying abstract mathematical principles to the very real problem of keeping everyone alive. He watched in amazement as the 5 Deathworlders transformed from students into a coordinated emergency response team. "Look familiar?" June asked him quietly, gesturing to their display model. With a shock, Professor Tyke realized they were using the same approach they had applied to his theoretical resource distribution problem, only now the resources were oxygen and power, and the stakes were actual lives. "Redirect oxygen flow from uninhabited sectors," Mina suggested, pointing to the model. "Create a pressure gradient that will naturally push breathable air toward populated areas. We need to establish backup power to critical junctions here, and here," Hyun added, marking spots on the display. "That will create redundancy in case of further system failures." Other students began to gather around, watching the humans work. The initial panic subsided as they saw the purposeful activity and heard the confident voices of the Deathworlders. "It's not elegant," June admitted as they implemented their plan, "but it will keep everyone alive until proper repairs can be made." 3 hours later, repair teams arrived from the nearby space station. They found the situation stabilized, oxygen levels maintained at survivable levels, power rerouted to critical systems, and the Academy population calm and organized. The chief engineer looked at the emergency measures implemented by the humans and shook his head in amazement. Whoever did this saved everyone on this asteroid. These solutions aren't in any standard emergency protocol. Professor Tyke looked at his 5 human students who were finally showing signs of exhaustion now that the immediate danger had passed. "No," he agreed. "They come from a much more challenging school than our protocols ever imagined." After the crisis, the Galactic Academy changed forever. Professor Tyke called a special class session 1 week after the emergency. The large lecture hall was packed with students and faculty from across the academy. Today we will analyze an unexpected application of mathematical theory, Professor Tyke began. His skin glowed with warm, appreciative colors as he gestured toward the human students seated in the front row. On the display screen, he showed the humans' original solution to his resource distribution problem alongside the emergency response plan they had implemented during the crisis. The similarities were striking and obvious to everyone. What appeared concerning to us was actually survival adaptation, Professor Tyke explained. Our human colleagues applied their unique problem-solving approach to save us all. The 5 humans sat quietly, looking slightly uncomfortable with the attention. "We don't glorify conflict," Mina said when invited to speak. "On Earth, we prepare for challenges because our world has taught us to expect them. Our mathematics developed alongside our need to survive," Day added. "When resources are sometimes scarce and conditions can change rapidly, planning for worst-case scenarios becomes normal." Professor Nari, who had initially expressed concerns about the humans, now stood beside Professor Tyke. "We have much to learn from each other," she announced. "The Council has approved a new curriculum initiative, Practical Crisis Response Mathematics. In the following months, the Academy began incorporating Deathworlder perspectives into its courses. Professor Tyke himself developed a new class that combined theoretical mathematics with practical emergency applications. One day, toward the end of the semester, Professor Tyke observed a study group that included students from 5 different species. At the center sat Day, patiently explaining to a Lumina student named Sun how to anticipate system failures. "Don't just calculate for ideal conditions," Day was saying. "Ask yourself, what happens if this connection fails? How quickly do resources deplete if demand suddenly increases?" Meanwhile, Sun was helping Day understand the elegant mathematical principles that could make his solutions more efficient. "Your approach works, but this formula reduces the calculation steps by 40%. Professor Tyke smiled as he watched this exchange. What had once seemed like dangerous thinking now appeared as valuable diversity. The Academy was stronger for having different perspectives. The final exam that semester featured a complex problem involving resource allocation during a simulated environmental emergency. Students worked in mixed species teams, applying both theoretical elegance and practical crisis planning. In retrospect, Professor Tyke told the Academy Council during their end-of-term meeting, "Our fear of the humans' approach was based on our own limited perspectives. What we saw as preparation for conflict was actually preparation for survival." And survival, Counselor Rim acknowledged, is something they understand better than any of us. As the new term approached, applications from Earth had tripled. The Academy was now specifically recruiting students from other death worlds as well, recognizing the unique value of their perspectives. Professor Tyke finished updating his course, Materials for the Coming Semester. His new textbook was titled Theoretical and Practical Mathematics, Bridging Perspectives Across Worlds. On the dedication page he had written, "To my 5 human students who taught me that mathematics isn't just about elegant theory. Sometimes it's about staying alive." Outside his window, the stars shone brightly against the darkness of space. Professor Tyke reflected on how quickly things had changed. The universe was more dangerous than the Academy had wanted to admit. But with students like Day, June, Hana, Mina, and Yun, they were now better prepared to face whatever challenges might come. Tyke said confidently. What could possibly go wrong? The answer would come sooner than he expected when a simple, academic exercise would reveal just how differently Deathworlders approached problems and shake the foundations of the peaceful academy forever.